Jack wept over the death of the title character's protégé Kohl, but the graphic death was toned down in Reacher Season 3. Although the title character in Lee Child's Jack Reacher books hasn't changed or evolved much over the course of the series' nearly 3 decades, it's still a compelling read. Reacher's body is that of Dolph Lundgren, but his mind is that of Sherlock Holmes, and whenever he appears, an action movie usually starts. Alan Ritchson's Avenger goes undercover to track down an old foe in the 3rd season of Reacher, which is an adaptation of Child's Persuader. Although he has personal stakes in a certain mission or investigation in a number of novels, Reacher rarely becomes emotional. While there are fewer instances of Jack losing his temper or allowing his rage to control him in the Amazon adaptation, Reacher is even more stoic in the books. Even in Season 3, when he finds his friend and co-worker Dominique Cole's, Mariah Robinson, mutilated body, he controls his emotions. Reacher, played by Alan Ritchson in close-up, looking distressed. This is not to say that Ritchson's Reacher isn't grieving over Cole's passing. Rather, his feelings are kept inside of him while he clenches his jaw and has glassy eyes. This is in contrast to Persuader, where Reacher responds more explosively to Dominique Cole's murder and torture. Kohl was severely beaten and tortured before being stabbed in the brain by dishonest military intelligence officer Quinn, Brian T., whose house Reacher finds her severely disfigured body in. After discovering Cole's body, Reacher bursts into tears and vomits, stating that it had been at least 20 years since he had last shed a tear. Given how much he loved Kohl and how brutal her death was, it's a very vulnerable moment for the character. The brutality of Cole's murder is significantly toned down in Amazon's series. The episode vaguely describes her torture and it's unclear exactly what Quinn did to her. Reacher wanted to give Kohl the credit, so he gave her the assignment to arrest Quinn. Reacher and Kohl had been looking into Quinn's sale of classified material. This turned out to be a grave error, and Reacher suffered for years as a result. Almost immediately after discovering Cole's body, Reacher locates and confronts Quinn, as Season 3 somewhat compresses the timeline. Reacher was so focused on getting even with Quinn that he didn't have time to grieve for his friend. Reacher seizes Quinn and uses his own pistol to shoot him in the forehead after leading him to the edge of a cliff. That ought to have killed Quinn in at least 3 different ways according to logic, but he miraculously lives. Upon learning this, Reacher becomes consumed by a desire for vengeance, which propels him throughout Season 3, calling Quinn the single worst person I've ever known. Since the trauma and guilt of killing her have never left Reacher, it is possible that he wept for Kohl off-screen. Perhaps Ritchson's character's overtly emotional behavior would be distracting to the showrunners, or they thought it might come across as corny if it wasn't executed well. Jack weeping would have been a daring move because audiences are accustomed to him controlling himself. Reacher is descended from a long and proud line of tough action heroes who rarely, if ever, cry and are men of few words. Child's most well-known quote from the books is "Reacher said nothing." It is impossible to imagine Sylvester Stallone in Cobra or Arnold Schwarzenegger in Commando crying because action movies simply don't do that. Reacher, played by Alan Ritchson, crying over Cole's body would have been a truly shocking scene, and the series ought to have attempted it. Again, there was probably worry that Reacher wouldn't handle a crying scene, but this decision lessens the book's impact. Child wished to convey to readers the anguish and rage that Reacher experienced after finding Kohl. The series' portrayal of this is still poignant, but it would have been far more impactful if it had stuck to Reacher's initial response. Reacher will never forget Cole's passing as a watershed moment in his life and military career. Lee Child could have used it on the series as well, if he thought it was appropriate to make his reticent hero cry. Although some viewers might have objected to this blatantly sappy reaction, Reacher's tears over his friend's unjust death would hardly diminish his ruggedness. In addition, he had already cried through a flashback in Season 1 when he met his dying mother.